Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're tackling the latest twists and turns in the potential tech tariff saga between the U.S. and China.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, hasn't it?
Definitely. We're working from a recent report. It's titled Big Tech Dares to Dream, and it really captures the whiplash the industry felt over some recent announcements.
Exactly. And our goal today, for everyone listening, is basically to cut through some of that confusion.
Right. Try and make sense of the seemingly contradictory signals and figure out what it might actually mean for the tech sector.
We'll aim for a clear overview, without drowning you in trade jargon, just the essentials.
Okay, let's dive in. So the report starts with what initially sounded like, honestly, pretty positive news for tech companies.
The word was that a whole lot of tech categories, we're talking smartphones, computers, even that specialized chip-making equipment, were going to be exempt from some new China tariffs.
And the reaction was, well, predictably upbeat.
Oh, absolutely. The report mentions a Wall Street analyst literally calling it dream news. You could feel this sort of collective exhale, a hope that maybe things were looking up.
Bit of recovery potential after some tough times.
For sure. Markets seem poised to react positively, too.
Yeah.
It just shows how much these trade policies hang over the industry.
But that dream didn't last very long, did it? The picture got complicated pretty quickly.
Yeah, enter President Trump on Truth Social that Sunday. His message, well, it poured some cold water on that initial optimism.
He basically said, hold on, not so fast.
That's one way to put it. He made it very clear, from his viewpoint anyway, that there weren't any broad exceptions being made for tech.
So tariffs were still on the table for these products?
Yes. He specifically said tech products would be subject to tariffs, just maybe under a different classification. He actually wrote, and this is a direct quote,
Okay.
There was no tariff exception announced on Friday. These products are subject to the existing 20% fentanyl tariffs, and they were just moving to a different tariff bucket.
A different bucket. Interesting phrasing. So the idea was tariffs, yes, just categorized differently.
Sort of implying they were always meant to be tariffed. It was just a question of which tariff label they'd get.
So that initial wave of relief just evaporated.
Pretty much. And then, to add another layer, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick spoke about it.
Right, I saw that. He was on ABC News and seemed to back up Trump's statement.
He did, but he introduced an interesting distinction. Lutnick talked about those initial exemption reports applying to what he called reciprocal tariffs.
Okay, so maybe explain reciprocal tariffs quickly for folks.
Sure. Basically, they're tit-for-tat tariffs.
Yeah.
One country hits you with tariffs, so you hit them back on different goods. That's the reciprocal part.
Got it. So the initial good news was supposedly about those kinds of tariffs.
That's what Lutnick implied. But then he pivoted and talked about new, upcoming tariffs, specifically semiconductor tariffs.
Ah, okay. A new category.
Exactly. And he was very clear that these new semiconductor tariffs would cover those tech products, the phones, the laptops that people initially thought were safe.
And he gave a timeline for these new ones. It wasn't just some distant threat.
No, not at all. He suggested they could be rolled out in the next month or two. So quite soon, potentially.
Wow, okay. That puts a clock on it.
Definitely. And he also explained the thinking behind it.
Which seemed heavily focused on bringing manufacturing back to the U.S., right? National security argument.
Precisely. He said, let me find the exact quote here.
Yeah.
Yeah. All those products are going to come under semiconductors, and they're going to have a special focused type of tariff to make sure that those products get reshored.
Reshored, bringing production home.
Exactly. He continued, we need to have semiconductors, we need to have chips, and we need to have flat panels. We need to have these things made in America. We can't be reliant on Southeast Asia for all of the things that operate for us.
So a very clear message there about domestic production being the priority.
Unmistakably. It signals a potential major push towards onshoring critical tech, even if it causes disruption.
And this wasn't just Lutnick freelancing. The White House confirmed this direction too.
Yes, the report mentions Business Insider got an email confirmation directly from the White House.
What did they say?
Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt essentially doubled down, saying President Trump has made it clear America cannot rely on China to manufacture critical technologies such as semiconductors, chips, smartphones, and laptops.
So confirmation that despite that initial glimmer of hope, tech tariffs are still very much part of the plan.
Correct. But the White House statement also added another dimension.
Oh, what was that?
It wasn't just about tariffs. Leavitt pointed to efforts to actively encourage companies to build here.
Right, the investment angle.
Exactly. She mentioned the president securing trillions of dollars in U.S. investments from the largest tech companies, including Apple, TSMC, and NVIDIA.
Suggesting these big players are already moving to onshore manufacturing?
That was the message, that they're hustling to onshore their manufacturing in the United States as soon as possible, and doing so at the direction of the president.
So it's presented as a kind of carrot and stick approach, tariffs maybe being the stick, and these investments the carrot.
That seems to be the framing, yes. A push for domestic production using multiple levers.
Okay, so with all this back and forth, the initial good news, then the reversal, then the confirmation, how did the industry itself, investors and analysts, actually process all this?
Well, the report says that initial excitement was definitely tempered, probably an understatement by Trump's Sunday comments.
Understandable. That optimism likely faded fast.
It did. But interestingly, even with the confusion, some analysts tried to find maybe a silver lining, or at least a less bad interpretation.
How so?
Well, remember, Trump mentioned putting tech under the existing 20% fentanyl tariffs bucket.
Right, that specific phrasing.
One analyst pointed out that, hey, while 20% isn't great, it's still better than potentially getting hit with much higher tariffs, maybe even up to 145% if these products got caught up in a harsher reciprocal tariff fight.
Ah, I see. So classifying them under that existing 20% structure, even if it wasn't the 0% they hoped for, was seen as maybe dodging a bigger bullet.
Kind of a lesser of two evils argument, maybe.
Okay.
A good step compared to a worst-case scenario, as one analyst put it.
Makes sense in that context. And what about venture capitalists, people investing directly in tech?
The report quotes Matt Turk, a VC. He called that initial short-lived exemption news a major relief, especially for tech and AI.
But then came the reversal.
Right. And his follow-up comment really kind of summed up the mood. He said the exemption seemed like the sensible thing to do in an otherwise completely nonsensical series of decisions.
Oof. Capture some frustration there.
Yeah, it really highlights the volatility and, frankly, the unpredictability that the industry feels it's dealing with regarding these trade policies.
Now, we focused a lot on the U.S. side. What was China's take on all this? How did they react?
Good point. The report includes a statement from China's Ministry of Commerce. They acknowledged the initial exemption news, but they weren't exactly celebrating. They called it a small step and basically said it wasn't nearly enough.
What do they want?
Their position was pretty clear. They urged the U.S. to completely cancel all remaining reciprocal tariffs. So no enthusiasm, just a reiteration of their demand for a broader de-escalation.
Okay, let's try to pull this all together then. What are the key things our listeners should take away from this, whirlwind couple of days of news?
I think takeaway number one is that the initial relief in the tech world was very temporary. New tariffs, specifically targeting tech, these semiconductor tariffs, seem likely and could arrive relatively soon.
So the tariff threat for tech is still very real.
Very real. Takeaway number two is the why behind it from the U.S. administration's perspective. It's heavily framed around national security and this big push to reshore manufacturing of critical tech components.
It's not just about trade balances. It's presented as strategic.
Exactly. That reshoring goal seems central. But, and this is takeaway three, it's crucial to remember how uncertain everything still is.
Right. Things can change fast.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We don't know the exact scope, the final rates, or the precise timing of these potential new tariffs.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of ambiguity, and the situation remains really dynamic. The industry is definitely on watch.
So wrapping up this deep dive, based on the Big Tech Dares to Dream report, it's clear the U.S.-China tech tariff situation is, complex and still very much evolving.
It really is. And that leads to a final thought, maybe something for listeners to chew on.
Okay.
What are the potential long-term ripples from all this? Beyond the immediate headlines, how might these policies reshape the global tech supply chain?
And what about that balance between, say, economic efficiency, getting things made cheaply, versus national security?
Precisely. And ultimately, what does it mean for innovation, for consumers? Will we see higher prices, slower development? Or will this push for onshoring maybe spark different kinds of innovation?
Lots of questions, definitely. A complex picture with consequences we'll likely be watching unfold for a long time.
Absolutely. It's definitely a space to keep a close eye on.